One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Okay, I'm super excited to talk to you about today's topic because this is something that not only I want you to understand, like me being your podcast coach, podcast therapist, podcast guru, however you want to label our relationship together, right? Because hopefully you're tuning in on a regular basis and we feel like we know each other, right? We have this connection. Well, I want to tell you today all about how my podcast has absolutely exploded my business in the best possible way. And I want you to consider some of these things as well as you look at your own business. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Krystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? What's up, everybody? Krystal Profit in the house today. Okay, sorry, I was living out this weird radio DJ fantasy, and I don't think that I like it. I don't think that that's my radio DJ voice. Okay, do you listen to people in the car and you're like driving and the kids are like, oh my gosh, let me pick this song. And then you turn around and you're like, do you realize that we just had to listen to whatever was on the radio growing up? Okay, there was no, hey mom, can you play Justin Bieber? Hey mom, can you play Marshmello? There was none of that. It was, oh, we're going to listen to Celine Dion again because that is what is on the radio. Oh, Tim McGraw's in the house because that's what's on the radio. Or whenever I was in my dad's work truck and it was just classic rock, mostly the Eagles, then that's what we listened to. So radio DJs, when they would come on, right, like they like burst into your eardrums and they're just like, yo, what's up? Like, we're back from break. Now we want to talk to you about blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's terrible. That was the worst segue to get into what we had to talk about today. But I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I'm like, I need to come up with a better radio DJ voice just to kind of keep things interesting around here. But hopefully you find things interesting enough, because I kind of did it a while back with the whole buttholes and excuses, right? Oh, and if you're just listening, and this is the first time tuning in and you're like, wait, I think I missed that. Yeah, go back and listen to episode 212. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, this has been the longest segue to get into what we have to talk about today, because today is actually really, really important, because we're going to talk about 3 ways that my podcast has absolutely exploded my business since I started it. Like, if I look back at, if you don't already know this, I started my podcast as The Rookie Life. That was my original podcast name. It was a totally different topic than what we talk about here today. And those episodes are still there. If you didn't know this, here we are at episode 214, but the first 45 episodes of this podcast or something totally different. And I leave those there in case you want to go back and reference them. I didn't go back and re-edit them. I didn't change them to, oh, these were before we were the profit. Nope. The way that they were uploaded is the way that they began. And I'm embarrassed of some of them, but you know what? You just can't go back and rewrite history, okay? Like, it's kind of like that one person that you dated a long time ago and you're like, ooh, really, that was a train wreck of a relationship. But then your friends will come back and tell you every once in a while, they're like, oh, you remember that one guy? And you're like, yeah, I know. Let's not talk about it. That's how I feel about some of those episodes. And that might be your situation after you launch your podcast. I have my students tell me all the time, they're like, oh man, I finally found my traction. I found my audience. I found my voice. But those first few episodes were a doozy. And I'm like, do not go back and touch those. You will appreciate those so much more a few years from now, whenever you've been podcasting for a while. But I wanted to talk to you about how I started my journey, right? Because that's how I started. I didn't really have much of a business per se. Like, I didn't have strategy. I didn't have, okay, I'm going to talk about this and I'm going to have my website set up this way. I'm going to do Facebook ads and I'm going to there was none of that when I first started. It was, hey, here's a microphone. Who can I talk to? And what can we talk about that will be of interest to other people besides just me? That was basically how I started. But over the course of this journey for 2.5 years, I have learned so much, and there's certain key things that I wanted to share with you on how my podcast has helped me explode my business. And the first one is social media. Now, I don't have a huge following. I'm not going to be like, I have 100,000 followers. They're totally engaged. They like all my stuff. They comment on everything. I'm getting DMs out the wazoo. I'm not going to tell you that, because that's not reality. But I can tell you this, what has helped me in having a podcast is my podcast regularly gives me something to talk about on social media. That's why if you go to my Instagram, you will see sound bites. You will see graphics related to my podcast. You will see all kinds of stuff. Like, as you scroll through, you can go back for the last 1.5 years and see, okay, whoever this chick is, right? Look, let's pretend you stumbled upon me. You found me on YouTube or a Google search and you stumble upon me and you're like, oh, let's go see what this chick is all about. You will realize pretty quickly that I have a podcast, or you'll say, what is this profit thing that she's talking about? Like, oh, that's her last name. Oh, wait, that's her podcast name. Oh, okay. Like, you'll be able to connect the dots pretty quickly, simply because I talk about this podcast and the Potty Report on a regular basis. And what I love about having the podcast is it gives me something to talk about, because before I had my show, I know if you've listened to the show for a while, you may know this, but if you're new around here, I started off in my online journey blogging and trying to figure out social media and what to use it for. And, blogging's more written and social media is more visual. How can I connect the two? Y'all, I was literally just sharing links to blog posts on my social media. Like there was no strategic graphic and carousel pictures and, I'm going to do a story about this. And no, there was none of that going on. I was mostly sharing pictures of my kids. And every once in a while, I would throw in something that, let's just be honest, it wasn't very smart. It wasn't very strategic. It was just like, oh, by the way, did you know I have a blog from time to time? It wasn't like this is going to happen once a week. This is going to happen twice a week. Or even I'm going to do this on a regular monthly basis. I had no idea what I was doing. But cut to now, on my Instagram, on my Facebook, you can go and see that I'm talking about my podcast on a regular basis. And it's so easy for me to talk about my podcast because I have made sure that my social media is people that are interested in podcasting, right? I haven't tried to grow this audience of people that would never listen to my podcast because it's not really a great idea, right? Why would I try to grow a huge following that is just interested, let's say, in cooking? Okay, cooking is something I'm interested in, but it's not all I talk about all day, every day. I mean, that would be incredible, but if I'm being really honest, I love to cook. I like to bake. I'm not going to say I love to bake. I like to bake, but if I had to do it every single day in a setting of taking pictures and doing videos and making sure I had all the ingredients right and doing all that's too much pressure. Don't be putting pressure on a hobby that I absolutely love. So I wouldn't want to grow a fan base around cooking with Krystal. And then it's but by the way, I have this podcast about podcasting. That does not make any sense. So if you're growing your social media right now, I want you to focus on growing your following around your podcast, because what will happen is you will put a post out about your podcast. You'll say, here's a graphic, here's a soundbite, here's a video related to, this interview that I did with someone. And what will happen is you'll post it on social media, and guess what? Your numbers will go up. Your downloads will go up because those people are seeing them and saying, oh yeah, Krystal has a new podcast episode today. I'm going to go listen to it. I forgot. It's Tuesday. She has a new episode. I know it's going to be incredible, right? I hope that's what you say every time. I'm totally tooting my own horn here. I hope that you're oh my gosh, I cannot wait. But let's just stop there because it's getting a little narcissistic, right? Right. Okay, let's just move on from that. But social media it was just a game changer once I had my podcast because it's what I talked about. I gave interesting facts about my guest. I like to share a picture, like I said, the soundbite, and it just kind of freed me up mentally to not have to worry, oh my gosh, what am I going to talk about on social media this week?
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
I don't ever ask that question anymore. I say, where should I talk about social media this week? Where meaning do I talk about what's coming up on the podcast? Do I go backwards and do in case you missed it, here's 5 awesome episodes you should go check out. Or, here's a soundbite from the guest that we had last week. Or here's the upcoming schedule of what you can look forward to in January 2021. whatever that looks like, all I'm simply doing is looking inward into the content I've already created, and I'm pulling from that to post it on social media. So that's number one. Like how my podcast has helped me explode my business is I no longer have to wonder, what am I supposed to post on social media? Okay, number one. Number two is guesting. This has helped me explode my business in two separate ways. Now, I say guesting almost in like air quotes because guesting means me guesting on other podcasts to talk about my podcast. Like, oh, Krystal, come on, talk about podcasting, share about your podcast. Oh my gosh. If this was a drinking game on how many times I say podcast every single time, like we would just be completely trashed until New Year's, right? Well, I don't drink. If you did not know that, I don't drink. I've actually been 7 years sober this year. So yeah, like high fives all the way around, but I don't drink. But if this were a drinking game for you, I'm fine if you drink. That's fine. That's cool. But yeah, you'd be trashed. You'd be trashed from now until kingdom come if every time I said the word podcast, you took a shot. But anyway, podcast guesting has helped me reach more people, but it's also been great to have people guest on my show because when someone comes onto my podcast, I say, hey, can you share this with your network? Can you share this with your audience? Can you include this interview in your email list or on your social media? So I am very intentional with the people that I reach out to, and this has helped me explode my business. It's helped me get my name in front of more people that are interested in podcasting. And that is very crucial. It's also, this is kind of like nested under guesting, but having something to share if you're going to guest on someone else's podcast is super, super important. Now, what do I mean by that? That means having a free resource, giving yourself the ability to collect people's email addresses is so smart. So if you're thinking about guesting on more podcasts going into 2021, you need to have this at the top of your list. You need to figure out, what am I going to tell people that I could offer them? Is it a free checklist? It's a free training video. It's whatever it is. You want to make sure that you have that top of mind as you approach guest or host to be a guest on their show. This is very, very important. But y'all, guesting on podcast is one of my top priorities for 2021. I've already met with someone that's going to help me guest on more podcasts next year. I'm really excited about this opportunity, and I just know like I'm going to be doing a lot of intentional guesting next year. This is just something that I know needs to be a priority for me. Why? Because it has helped me explode my business, getting in front of new people, making sure I'm not just like kind of recycling the same message over and over again, because I want to help as many podcasters as I can. And I mentioned this before, but did I tell you my goal in 2021? That sounded really country. Did I tell you my goal? I don't know why that came out that way. But my goal in 2021 is to have a community of podcasters that reaches 1 million downloads in 1 year. I know it sounds crazy. You're like, Krystal, I don't know how that's possible, but we're going to figure out the logistics on how to measure this and how it's going to work. But this is happening. This is something that I want all of us as a community to contribute. Because one, I want you just launching your podcast and getting it out there if you haven't already done so. But two, I think it's that like collective teamwork that we can all work towards this one goal that just has me so fired up. I'm so excited about this. So be looking for more information on how you can participate, and we're going to be doing some fun giveaways and prizes and all kinds of cool things. So 1 million downloads in 1 year. We can do this, right? We can do this, y'all. We can make it happen. So the first reason, or the first way my podcast has exploded my business, is social media. The second is guesting on other podcasts and having people guest on my show. And the third is, and this is my absolute favorite, and you know this, if we've interacted in any kind of way, whether it's in our free Facebook group or it's on Instagram or it's on a Facebook Live, My podcast has such a special place in my heart because it has allowed me to get to know you, my audience. It has allowed me to get to know you so much better in ways that I never could have imagined. So, but I don't want to just say that as like a big fluffy, like, oh, rainbows and unicorns, like we all love each other. We're so excited. I just pictured the movie Trolls, right? Where like their little flower watches like ding and they're like, oh, it's hug time. Like it's nothing like that. Okay. I want to tell you this at like business owner to business owner, because this is really important, because I can look on the back end of my podcast statistics and see what you enjoy. I can see which pieces of content resonates with you more, or which ones, like I'll launch an episode and it's like crickets. No one listened to that one, or no one even went back and listened to that one. I can tell what you're most interested in based upon your downloads. And that's really so important because it helps me understand you on a better level, and it helps me cater future content to really just deliver things that you're interested in, as opposed to what I think I should tell you, because there's a very big difference. And if you have a business, if this is something that you're looking to incorporate or create with like in the next 12 months, you really need to know this, that understanding your podcast audience should be one of your top priorities, because it has helped me explode my business. It has helped me be more strategic with how I set things up in my business. So my podcast has just helped me get to know you better in so many incredible ways. So the podcast statistics is one. Whenever I put out a free resource, and it's funny because, I put my heart and soul into like the free lead magnets, the free master classes, the free video trainings. And sometimes y'all don't care for them. And that hurts a little bit. I'm not going to lie, it hurts the ego a little bit, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I poured over this for hours and hours and hours. But then I'll slap together some other checklist or something like that, and y'all are like salivating, saying, Krystal, give this to me. This is exactly what we've been waiting for. That will happen to you too. As a business owner, as a podcast host, you will throw out free resources and people will say, this is incredible. It's what I've been looking for. And other stuff, it'll be not so much. But if you can measure those things with your business and tie them back to your podcast, you're going to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this worked, all because I mentioned it in my show, all because I made sure and had that really intentional self-sponsored ad linked directly in the show notes. And speaking of that, this is actually a great time to bring that up. So self-sponsored ads, because I get questions about this all the time. In the show notes for this episode, krystalprofit.com/episode 214, I'm going to link to a YouTube video all about creating your own self-sponsored ads. Like, how do you create your own podcast ads? So go to the show notes of this episode, krystalprofit.com/episode 214, and I want you to go watch that video. It's not super long. I know it's like 10 minutes or less. Actually, I should know this, but off the top of my head, I'm like, I know like most of my videos are less than 15 minutes. I can guarantee you that. Like there's a few out there that are way longer, but those are, I could probably count on one hand how many are longer than 20 minutes, but go watch that video. I want you to do this as you go into the new year. I want you to be intentional with how you talk about your business on your podcast, because it matters. And because if I never talked about my business on this podcast, it wouldn't have exploded my business, and it wouldn't have set me on the path of having my best year ever going into 2021. So again, I'm going to recap those once again. So the 3 ways that my podcast has exploded my business. Number 1, it's given me stuff to post on social media, which is incredible, especially whenever you can talk one-on-one with the people that are listening to your show. Number 2, podcast guesting for you being a guest on another podcast and having other guests be on your show. Growing your audience should be a priority in the coming year. And number 3, it's given me a platform to get to know you, my audience. And I'm so grateful for that. If you have not introduced yourself, I would love for you to come hang out with us in our free Facebook group. It's the Profit Podcast Online Community. It'll be linked in the show notes. Come hang out with us because y'all have just all of a sudden turned into the chatty Cathys of the world. And I love it. I love it. Y'all are asking such great questions about what happens if like someone cancels on you last minute. What do you do? Or people getting feedback on their podcast artwork or asking questions that have to do with equipment or editing. Like, you need to come hang out with us in our free Facebook group because that's where it is. And as a podcaster, especially if you don't have anyone else in your family or your immediate friends that understand what you do, or even more, what you're trying to do, then you need to surround yourself with people who are already going through the same thing. If that's what you're looking for, we would love to have you join us in our free Facebook community. But again, you can find links to all of those at krystalprofit.com/episode 214. But that's all I have for you today. So if you enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to subscribe if you have not already, wherever you're listening to this. And as an extra special Christmas present to me, actually, when this episode airs, it will be my birthday on the 23rd. So my birthday is technically tomorrow. As an early birthday present, I would love for you to leave us a rating and a review on this show. So when you do this, it helps us push the podcast out in front of more people. You can give us a star rating between 1 and 5 stars. I'd love it for a 5-star on my birthday. That would be fabulous. But I would love for you to tell us what you loved about this episode, or another episode that you've heard, or a number one takeaway that you've had since you started listening to the show. But again, go to krystalprofit.com/episode 214. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, "Send Krystal a text message." And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, "Send Krystal a text message." And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.